ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Millions of Australians live in apartments, and it's a number that keeps growing. But many would have no idea how their apartment blocks are being managed and will be shocked to find out. Today, Four Corners reporter Linton Besser on the greed in Australia's strata industry that's draining the pockets of innocent Australians. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Linton, Australia's housing crisis, it has meant that our capital cities are really starting to build upwards. There are a lot more people, I think it's safe to say, living in apartments.
Well, there's 2.5 million people in Australia already in apartments, Sam. And yes, anyone living, particularly in a capital city, can see the cranes on the horizon every day. Buildings are going up and governments have to get behind this because house prices are just out of reach for most Australians, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Anyone who's travelled overseas to major cities knows that really that's how cities of the future in Australia are going to look.
Yeah, absolutely. And these apartment buildings, some of them, are governed by stratas. So you just better explain to me what stratas are before we go on, because not everyone knows.
Yes, I know. It is a bit of a weird arcane thing, isn't it? So when you buy an apartment, you become a member by default of something called an owner's corporation. And this is the thing about buying an apartment is you're not buying land and you're buying a very weird piece of real estate, which is in fact just the cubic airspace between four walls, a ceiling and a floor. All the rest of it is actually owned by a corporation, by a membership of fellow owners that are responsible for the upkeep of this asset. And that is critical. And this owners corporation is responsible for ensuring that all that common property, those walls and windows and stairs and in some cases elevators and swimming pools and gyms and car parks are maintained. And that if something comes up, they've got the financial means by which to deal with it. And that owners corporation elects a committee, and the committee has a chairperson, a treasurer, a secretary and however many members. And this is really what our story is about the professional services firms, or they call themselves professionals, hired to help with that process, hired to help set up budgets, run ledgers, hire contractors, source insurance, and just make sure that the building is in good running order.
All right, so you, as part of your investigation, put out a call to people living in apartments to get their strata stories, and it's pretty safe to say, Linton, you were bombarded.
Overwhelmed.
By responses.
I mean, some 2,600 complaints we got.
Oh my gosh.
About a huge variety and array of strata management companies from every corner of the country. And getting these responses, Sam, it was clear that this is an area that has been neglected by the media, but more importantly by government. So there were some really serious issues we dug into.
All right, so let's delve a bit further into those. Let's start with Allison Parks, because she shared her experience with you and it's not very good.
Allison is a fantastic character. So she lives in Melbourne and she is actually a forensic accountant. She's a professor of I think it's data analytics and accounting. She's a super brain.
Yes.
She buys into this gorgeous building in Brunswick in Melbourne, but as she's reading through the financials that are supplied, because she's become by default a member of the owners corporation, she sees some red flags.
The longer I lived here, the more I realised that it looked like there were problems with the management of the finances. So that was why I got involved then.
And joined the committee.
Yes.
In that case, Sam, her building was managed by a company called Strata. And we discovered that company is notorious.
Okay, so she's chair of the actual committee.
She is.
She's thinking, oh, this is not very good. You know, the finances are looking a bit dodgy. So what did she do about it? What happened?
Well, I mean, there were a couple of problems, but one of the things which really stood out to Allison Parks was Strata Plan was helping the Owners Corporation chase down overdue levies. It's one of the things that these management firms do, and they cop a fee for doing so. But what was weird was that it was chasing down amounts of money which were minuscule.
People were being charged in ridiculous fashions. There was 2 apartments at one stage that owed 60 cents each, and Strata Plan charges $101.48 each to try and follow up on that 60 cents, which makes no economic sense at all.
The Owners Corporation obviously is better off simply, I don't know, forgiving the 60-cent debt rather than being repeatedly pinged $100 for Strata Plan sending an overdue notice. And as she dug deeper, it got worse. She would get the spreadsheet of the number of lots or apartments which were in arrears each month, and she'd put that on one side, and on the other side, she would put the financial accounts of how much Strata Plan had charged the Owners Corporation to issue notices to chase up these debts.
If there were 10 people who were actually in arrears, hadn't paid their levies on time, they were billing us for 34 notices being sent out. And what I discovered was a systemic problem.
Now, what that means is that there were 24 notices being sent for no proper purpose whatever. Now, they are phantom fees.
Wow, so she's written to them repeatedly and they're ignoring her. But then, Linton, she decides to actually just terminate the contract altogether.
Yeah, the committee just says, well, enough is enough. Let's terminate Strata Plan and we'll get some other mob in who might be better. At that point, Strata Plan responds with a letter threatening litigation. And the letter included a demand for $50,000 compensation.
Oh my gosh.
To cut a long story short, the committee pushed back and Strata Plan accepted less than half that amount.
That was on the finances side, but you also spoke to people whose apartments had basically fallen into disrepair. Tell me about David Pit Owen, because his case is fascinating.
David Pit Owen is this very charming retiree, lives in inner southern Sydney, and you know he bought into this large apartment complex. His apartment was fine. He was one of the lucky ones. But there were apartments in his building that were literally falling apart.
I've seen walls collapse. I've seen water running down the sides of walls in bedrooms. I've seen water bubbling up through pipes onto the balconies and flooding bedrooms.
So David Pit Owen thought to himself, oh my God, we cannot go on like this. What is going on? And started to take an interest in the affairs of the Owners Corporation. He discovered that the Owners Corporation had not held an annual general meeting for 3 years. There has to be a meeting of owners every year. And what this all came down to was a committee that was run by a character named Michael Lee.
And who is he?
Michael Lee, another fascinating character, he is a licensed strata manager. His wife owns the firm for which he works called Result Strata Management. And in this case, Michael Lee had been chairman of this building for many, many years. And at times, Sam, he was also its secretary and treasurer. In 2021, suddenly there's an AGM, finally. And at the AGM, Michael Lee reveals to the owners 2 things. One is that there's been a lawsuit underway against the builder over the defects in the building, which they didn't know about. And 2, that lawsuit, he proposed at this meeting, should be settled and the builder should be allowed to walk away. And people were horrified because, of course, the building was in a serious state.
A lot of the owners in the top 2 floors had rotting staircases, rotting walls, rotting carpet. Water was coming in through ceilings, through light fittings. How could you say that the defects had all been fixed. How could you possibly release the builder?
But the motion passed. And that's when David realised that there were a whole bunch of investors who don't live in the building, who don't want any money spent on either fixing the repairs or funding litigation to force the builder to fix the repairs, and that something must be done. So he spends the next 2 years marshalling owners, and in order that he can dislodge Michael Lee, form a new committee and get serious about fixing up the building.
Okay, so David's trying to take action. You've got to tell me about this meeting that was held where the bouncers turned up.
I know, can you believe it?
Unbelievable.
Well, people, I think, are going to choke on their wheat beaks when they watch the vision of this meeting. So it's last year in September, I believe, and David Pit Owen shows up and the other owners show up that have been organising to get a new committee up, and they're greeted by 6 or 7 security professionals at the door, blocking entrance. And then Michael Lee closes the doors and he railroads the meeting.
I have the authority and I have the power to run the meeting. You don't like it? You don't like it? Either you leave my meeting or go level 14 afterwards.
And then he announces, Sam, that the election for the new committee is about to be held, but it's going to be by secret ballot. And guess who remains in power? The same committee with Michael Lee still on it. And then he closes the meeting and walks out surrounded by his, phalanx of security muscle.
So the meeting is now officially closed.
What was the vote?
You're a lowlife. You're a scumbag. That's what you are. Man. Hey guys, we just got shafted.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now you actually did try to challenge him, didn't you, Michael Lee? He wasn't that keen though, Linton, to catch up. No,
he wasn't. We went and caught up with him the other day at another building he manages in northwest Sydney. He wasn't happy to see me, is the short answer.
ABC Four Corners, we're just wondering, we've got some questions we'd really like you to answer. Excuse me, don't touch the camera. Excuse me, don't touch the camera.
Yeah, okay. And the New South Wales government now has Michael Lee and the strata under investigation, as I understand it.
Yes, that's right.
Although Michael Lee, in an email to you, says he acted properly as a strata agent and as the committee chair. But, Linton, this all comes back to the owners of the apartments, doesn't it? And whether or not they're getting a fair deal and they know what's going on behind the scenes, and clearly a lot don't.
Well, that's right. And it is a logical conclusion, Sam, and it's a conclusion that the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has reached also. And the point is this, that if governments are going to rely on apartments being the solution to bringing housing prices under control, how are apartment owners going to have faith that their funds, their sinking and administrative funds, aren't being exploited by these opaque and murky arrangements?
I think we need a royal commission into the whole way the industry of strata management is run, leaving it up to individual strata managers to determine their moral code just doesn't work.
So, Linton, what's your advice then for apartment owners, given for now the regulations are nowhere near up to scratch, obviously, and we're not all Allisons?
Yeah, it's really tough. I think, and I've been asking this question of a lot of people, and the advice that's been given to me is be vigilant. Do not accept the assurances of your strata manager that all is well. Ask for the paperwork, get the records, get involved and protect your asset. Talk to the other owners, go to the committee meetings, go to the annual general meetings and take an active interest because it's your asset. The reality is you don't so much own real estate when you're an apartment owner as you own a share in a corporation. You own a share in a scheme that together has to ensure that the building is maintained and that you don't do your dough.
Linton Besser is an investigative reporter at the ABC. You can catch his Four Corners investigation tonight at 8:30 on ABC TV or later on ABC iView. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn and Anna John. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hooley. ABC News Daily will be back again tomorrow. Thanks for listening.